Another episode of Ay, 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 ay. How are you, David?
I'm well. How are you doing today, Ethan?
Uh, I've I've been very excited to have you on because your understanding of leadership, operational business management, your understanding of entrepreneurship, your understanding of military. Um, you have it all, and that's like a full package for this podcast.
I gotta send you more money, man, because I'm getting my best out of this retainer. This is great.
So, David, please tell us about yourself with as much as bragging possible, because we don't want to be humble around here.
Well, I'm not sure I will brag. I'll tell the facts as they are, and I'll allow you and anyone who's listening to come to their own conclusions. As I think you know, I'm a retired Army officer, as 24 years service. Most of that service was in military intelligence, starting with tactical intelligence and 6 combat deployments, starting with Somalia when Somalia was fun and exciting, and ending with Afghanistan back in 2011, and all of the bright spots in between that you can imagine. Um, Within the Military Intelligence Corps, starting around 1998, 1999, I fell into what was then called information operations, which was just polite words for cyber operations before we talked about cyber operations, and was integral in developing Army policy and capabilities and then operationalizing um, cyber operations in support of tactical and strategic capabilities for the Army and for the Joint Force. Did that, and that was a lot of groundbreaking. I like to say, and I'm sure someone who wears the actual patch will disagree, but U.S. Army Cyber was born out of the organization that I helped set up way back when called Det Meade for Detachment Meade and Fort Meade, um, and still friends with most of the people who were founding plank holders of that. Um, Over the 24 years of service, got more and more into cyber from an offensive and defensive perspective, as well as more strategic intelligence, and then retired out in 2011 as the lead mission manager for the NSA for Afghanistan and Pakistan, supporting our forces downrange. Uh, I declined brigade command and said I was not that I was I was an honor to be selected, but it was like I was ready to try something different. So I went into the commercial cybersecurity business. I said I don't want to have anything to do with government work. I had a reasonably successful career, retiring as an '06, retiring as a brigade command selectee. Let me see if I can't do this civilian thing. And as if I will tell you that I felt like a second lieutenant every day. I would swipe my garage badge in the morning just to see if I still had a job, if that little gate went up. Because your listeners might be really interested in this. This is a place you might want to footnote for foot stomp is apparently if you sell things for more than they cost, you get to keep the difference. It's called, well, they told me this, they told profit. That was it. So that was a whole new concept,
Right.
right? And learning how to do all of those things. What's the terms and conditions? How do you write a contract? How do you provide services? So I ran a cybersecurity service function for my first company out, and then established a technology innovation center for them, where we're bringing in international technologies to see if they're viable for U.S. customers. And I did that for a couple of years and got kind of an MBA on the job on how to do this whole private sector thing. And in the background of all of that, a former employee of, or not employee, a former subordinate of mine, who was he was the detachment commander, Det Meade, when I was that battalion executive officer. And then he was my executive officer when I was battalion commander in Denver. He resigned his commission at 18 years
Wow.
in order to start a company called BTS.
Mm.
Heard me that I was getting out. He's
Yeah.
like, dude, come work for me. Come work at BTS. I'm like, I can't spell profit and loss. I don't understand any of this. I can't have 80 families depending on me making a decision that I don't understand, say no. But after about 2 years of him humping my leg and wanting me to come over and all of that, I didn't know the answers, but I sort of kind of maybe knew the questions to ask. And so I came over and joined BTS as the CEO. And then within about a year, did a management buyout with the COO, who happened to be this gentleman, Craig's brother, Dan. And
Right.
so in 2015, Dan and I, co-owners of BTS, became, as I fondly say, scum sucking, bottom feeding, godless, soulless contractors serving the defense and intelligence community.
And how has that been going so far?
Sorry?
How has that been going so far?
Oh, that was a whole new lesson in leadership. Oh my God. Um, when I joined the company, we were what turned out to be the tail end of the largest single contract, and that wound down right when sequestration hit at the same time. So 85% of the company's revenue just fell out, just disappeared. And so we had to spend about 14, 15 months just stabilizing the company, getting it repositioned, grow the customer base, get additional contracts, and grow ourselves back out of that hole and became what we would refer to as BTS 2.0 from there. And that started a journey where I will say with you, with some pride, just last fall, we were awarded the NSA's largest small business award in their history. Um, so we're in the middle of executing that. So it's been a journey. I
Right.
like to say, if you're a small business owner, it's like a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
Uh, you need a neck brace, and the difference between the highs and lows can come in days, weeks, hours, minutes. And just it really just takes persistence to get to the far side. So just if you're doing that, stick with it.
Far as in federal acquisition.
Right, right, yeah.
Because
It's
you mean far side, I'm thinking like it is far, isn't it? It's a long trip.
it is. Um, so yeah, that's been the journey. So as much as I didn't want to be in government space and government work, I got pulled back into there. And so, most of BTS's work is federal within the DoD and the Intel community. For extracurricular work, just to round out the resume, I'm the executive chair of a company called Steer Tech that retrofits vehicles and focusing on class 4 to class 8 trucks and turning them into level 4 fully autonomous for slow speed, so for 35 miles and below. So think FedEx or UPS yard operations, all of those vehicles operating fully autonomously from parking to safety checks to fuel and maintenance to getting loaded up, and then the driver just gets in to go out on the street. And so we are deployed commercially with there. So that's been my biggest hook into the entrepreneur world, and I absolutely am having a ton of fun there. And then just have plugged into the Maryland ecosystem as tightly as I can. I'm the chair of the Maryland Technology Council's Tech Board and vice chair of the council. I'm on the board for TEDCO, which is Maryland's state investment arm. I'm on the board for what used to be called MISI Dreamport. It's now called the Technology Advancement Center, which is the U.S. Cyber Command's PIA organization, and then plugged into a couple of education and cultural not-for-profits just to make sure that I give back to the community that I live in. So it's been a real challenge and a goal to stay balanced and not just be a scum-sucking, bottom-feeding, godless, soulless contractor, but to be an actual functioning part of the community here in the city and the state.
I think I'm gonna buy a name tag that has my name on it. The title, bottom feeder. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's the nature of the beast. You need the whole ecosystem, right? And even the algae on the bottom of the ocean, the top of the ocean matters,
Right.
right? So, uh, look, that's what I mean by full package here, right? As in, like, since we've been doing this podcast, since I've been in an entrepreneurial journey, since I've been out of the military, it has been to understand that how can we give back, right? So this podcast is a meaning of giving back to the community through a knowledge, right? The knowledge that we share through this podcast is to capture military veterans that are already out or military veterans that are getting ready to get out. How do we get this knowledge to them so that way, as they're listening, they're like clicking in their head, like, wait, hold on, there's something here that I need to pay attention to. Be it I'm going to be a truck driver. I think a lot of the military veterans, when they're in the TAPS program, they talk about being a truck driver outside the military because there's a huge incentive to become a truck driver in the military. Well,
Right,
you could be a truck driver, but could be an expert in AI machine learning at the same time to figure out how to drive a truck using AI machine learning and have that truck be autonomous, right?
right, right,
And okay, do you get a job there, or do you want to be a startup that is an entrepreneur level? How do you do a startup not necessarily using AI machine learning, but to understand how AI machine learning will impact your startup,
right,
right?
right,
And be it a truck or be it a semiconductor chips, those are all hardwares in between, right?
right, right,
So how do you procure this hardware? How do you deploy this hardware? What are the environments like when it rains versus when it's too hot outside, right? Or
right,
it's too cold outside. You
right,
have to understand all these little nuances, and to have that whole chain of thoughts, which is the supply chain of your mind. How do you organize it? How do you get into it? Like if you get started, how do you stay in it, right?
sure,
So,
sure. Let
so
me
this
let
is
me share
like
with
the challenge that we face, and I think you are a full package to talk about all of that.
you. But let me start the conversation about how do you as an entrepreneur start thinking about these things because it starts with people. And I'll share with you a conversation I had last year when I was out in Austin for South by Southwest. I was in a cocktail party with a old friend of mine, former military, retired as well, and we were the three of us. There was me, him, and then there was a retired three-star who had just retired and found himself as the CEO of an entrepreneur startup. And at least two vodka tonics into it. I'm sorry, we were in Austin, Texas. We had ranch water, not vodka tonics, or as I called them, pond water, and that apparently gets you in trouble. Um, and I was asked, David, you've been out for a while. What's the one thing you'd tell this retired three-star about the change from military leadership to civilian leadership? And I said, and this came to me right away. It tells you the quality of the tequila. I said, this is going to sound way simpler than it really is.
That's right.
The number one realization for you, sir, is that people can quit.
Oh boy. Whew. All right.
Right?
That was
People quit,
yeah.
and that is not something that in when we're in uniform was ever anything you had to worry about. And frankly, even if you were a government civilian, it's not anything you really had to worry about. But if you unpack that sentence, people can quit. It drives if you are a leader, a business leader, an organizational leader with any level of emotional intelligence, it drives the way you communicate. It drives the way you structure your company for equities and incentives, not equities as in stock options or whatever, but how people's personal and professional growth line up with what you're trying to do at the company. It changes how you communicate. It changes how you set expectations. It changes everything about how you have to build a company and build a culture. Because people will take, we're all wore uniform. People will take their beating for a while, right? And people will buckle down if they see what the goal, the objective is, and they're aligned with it. They'll buckle down for more than a while. They'll be all in on it. But if you are capricious in how you treat people and how you communicate and how you structure your company's leadership and culture values, they'll quit.
Mhm.
In our world, they all have skills. And in my world, they have skills and clearances and they have no trouble finding another job.
That's right.
Right. So to your point, how do you think about it? You have to first think about who you are and what you thought made you successful in uniform is could very well be the least helpful thing from a personal relationship perspective when you're in a civilian or corporate leadership role. Now, all the planning and execution and all of that we've learned and that we live by, and second and third order effects and understanding how things interact and how a system of systems, All of that, which the military is amazing at teaching us, right? It's a human capital development organization that occasionally kills people and blows shit up. Um, so we come out, your veteran listeners, we came out with amazing skills, but if you don't think about the differences, you will fail. I'll pause there for thoughts before we talk about technology.
Yeah, but no, that's next, right? Because you're mentioning people, then you went into the process, then you deliver technology, people, process, technology, PPT, the other one that everybody should enjoy.
Right,
Um, so this power process, people, process, and technology. People process could be a solution delivery. People process could be a service. Government does that, but understanding people first has been the most difficult part of it because we understand solutions very well. We
right,
understand technology like back of our hands. I mean, technology takes less time, if not few hours and few days. You can understand technology, but to understand people and practice that principle of how to be around people with people, like you mentioned earlier, when there's 80 some people and their family depending on your decision making, you start thinking differently, right?
right,
And so that people piece, I think, is very important engagement on this conversation because when you talk about AI machine learning, there's no ifs and buts about human in the loop. There's no ifs and buts about who's going to be impacted. It's not going to be a bunch of aliens that lives off of this planet, outside of this planet, that's going to be impacted by AI machine learning. It'll be the
right,
people, right? And so
right,
for people to be engaged and people to start thinking about other people and how that ecosystem grows when you start thinking about other people rather than just yourself, you see a different view, right? So this
right.
AI machine learning, I'm not gonna go into all of it, but let's get started on the technology that you have in mind because there's people, process, technology. We've discovered two of them. Now let's jump into the technology side of things.
So we're actually going to take a quarter step backwards still because
Yeah.
you hit it hard, but I'll use slightly different words. AI is a social problem. Integration of AI is a social problem. So we talk about what AI is, artificial intelligence, and we can kind of unpack it. And then there's a lot of issues and concerns that as a leader you want to understand how AI affects whatever slice of the business world you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, humans are going to be interacting with the AI one way or another. Now, there's the old school of thought is, how can you use AI to do stuff better? But the evolution of thought has gone to is how can AI do new stuff that makes you better?
Mm.
So it's more about AI being a human machine partnership, what the technology does, moving to, as we see it get better and more natural, to a human machine integration. And so when you think about what does AI do and how does it impact the workforce, there's really kind of like three buckets of people when AI is in, and we'll be generic a little bit about what the company does that we're talking about. You could be driving trucks, you could be a law firm, you could be an accounting firm, you could be a coding company, and if you're writing software, there's a whole bunch of opportunity for AI to write code for you, and we're already seeing that in the news all the time. But generically speaking, there's three different buckets. Some people can be repurposed to higher value by allowing the AI to do things that are routinely, or to do things that don't require high level thought. And then people will move into a more value producing role and function. It really depends on the individual and how the organization aligns around it. But there are losers. There are some people who will just flat out become obsolete. Their functions and skills will be obsolete. And I think the set of people and jobs that become obsolete when AI rolls in will just continue to get bigger and bigger as the AI becomes more and more capable and more tuned to the specific sectors of industry. And then there are going to be winners, those who are able to master or drive the AI implementation and integration in order to do new things better. Okay. Um, and so having the access, if you're a leader of a company, having access to the right talent that can do all of this is just critical. It was an interesting statistic that I heard coming out of the head of AI for NSA, who made the observation when you look at the number of trained STEM PhDs and masters that are in the workforce right now, not in school, but in the workforce and in the academic space. There's not enough talent to train the next generation of talent,
Mm,
mathematicians and computational coding
right.
to keep up. So
Right.
that should be scary, right? And so if you are building AI or you're relying on an AI solution to making your business or your service better, having the right people who are trained to implement it and mature it, the supply chain of people to make this better is severely constrained, which means they're going to be fewer of them, which means the cost of them is going to be higher, recruiting them is going to be higher, retaining them is going to be higher. All these things, the cost of doing it right just goes up as the resources in this AI supply chain are more and more limited. So as a leader, you need to think about that. I'll pause there, and then I've got a couple other thoughts that I'd
Yeah.
have to kick out there.
I think if anybody's looking for the resources on these, if you don't have ears on NSA, you can definitely look into Dinfo Manpower and just say this Dinfo Manpower will indicate the workforce that is coming in the future will be lower in number than what we've anticipated for 2025, because what was supposed to happen in 2030-ish happened literally overnight in 2020, because a
Right.
lot of the workforces, they actually left the workforce and they're not coming back, and losses of people that we're experiencing today, it's only going to go down the rabbit's hole where we don't know what the workforce will look like. And if we don't have the augmentation, the digital twin of that workforce, we're in a deeper trouble than what we will anticipate. So this is not just for educational purposes of teaching professors that needs to be available for next generation. The next generation of workforce is itself is shrinking. So not to think about AI as a necessity rather than a luxury, I think it's a missed opportunity for anybody who's in a leadership role today saying, how do I strategize so I can be tactical sooner than later?
Right.
Well, you have to understand AI is a necessity, not a luxury.
It is a necessity, and access to the trained workforce is a necessity. So if you have the opportunity to connect with your local universities that are spitting out these mathematicians and computer science and coders who are theoretically coming out with at least the latest information about how to do it, at least the basic skills, that I think is a critical path to success if you're a technology enabled company. Get those relationships in place and get that pipeline of talent to allow you to bring it in. Um, Speaking of pipeline, we talk about AI and we throw the two letters out, and sometimes people will tack on machine learning, um, which is, I guess, the weak sister of AI, depending on how anyone wants to slice and dice it. But when you start unpacking really what's there and what you're trying to do, it's helpful, I think, to kind of walk through the steps and the elements of building a successful AI solution and then highlight some of the risks associated with them as you're trying to bring those into your company. So um, here's how I wrote my note. The origin of the AI model used is as important as the data being used. There's a whole bunch of companies out there that are using open source AI models and modifying and tailoring them to specific use cases. That's the open source business model and development model to a T. It's great, but the provenance of these models and the data is really a challenge. I mean, just walk through the chain. So you have the model that you're using. What's the data source? How has that data been labeled and prepped? What's the training data set that's being used? What's the provenance of that training data set? Where did it come from? Do you have licensed access to that data? We're hearing ChatGPT is, facing a whole bunch of liability lawsuits because they're using other people's IP without licenses. How old is that training data set? Is it skewed by the way it was collected? And we could spend another hour of a podcast pulling examples of all four of those, poisoning the AI before it even does the first job.
That's right.
How have you done the algorithmic training and how has that been built out? Back to the model itself, if you're using an open source model, do you really know what's happening and where that model came from and what are the explicit and implicit biases, whether intentional or not, on how that model was written? And bias is not a dirty word and it's not a loaded word. It's just a matter of fact. When a developer picks element A over element B to emphasize, that's a bias. It's a choice. And when you deploy the model, Um, how have you done the trust building as part of the AI deployment to your workforce so that people need the time and training necessary to understand what it does and how to adopt it usefully, what its capabilities are, and how it fits in the professional process? So, I mean, that whole workflow of I've got data, I'm trying to either clean up information that I already have access to, but it's too noisy or it's too much for me to actually work with, all the way through maybe this data or the AI is going to allow me to do new things that make the company better. But all of the intricacies of where did this AI solution come from are significant concerns for any leader.
I know I started laughing in the middle because you know it was a nightmare before ChatGPT to talk about AI. It was nightmare because what I have to do is unfold everything. And when I said that, hey, AI is cool, and everybody listened, but when I was shown the door, it's because I brought up the word data. So like we've been working on big data for 12 plus 50 some years now, and we've been collecting data for 30 some years. You're telling me I need more data than what I've already collected? Here's the
Right,
door. Don't let the door hit you, right? On your way out.
right,
Because nobody really wanted to talk about data. And I'm the data acquisition guy, right? So, I can tell you there's a risk management framework that you have to understand because if that data was handwritten by somebody who didn't consent to that data being something that you can collect and train on, what you're not thinking that far out. But if they ever find out that they used the data without ever asking for consent, what do you think is going to happen in your risk management framework? Are you willing to take that risk in the legal court after you deploy it and make, say, a few $1 million off of it, right? So,
right,
so there's a risk management framework that we have to consider, and I'm just laughing because you brought up data, and I'm thinking like, oh boy, let's
right.
let's get it cracking, let's go.
So there are examples, and I did not do enough homework for the podcast to be able to point to it with a footnote, but of slave labor being used to generate training data that is being used to train these algorithms. So, but as you think through that supply chain of your AI and how did you get there, every step brings potential liability issues and exposures for the company that's implementing it. Uh, whether due to malicious actors or due to willful ignorance to just benign ignorance to the stuff is so old that no one was even thinking about it when the core data set or algorithm was built or the training data was built, and we had no idea that this was the second and third order effect of what they were doing. So to your point, I guess maybe you asked the right question. Is there a risk management framework that ought to be built to specifically talk about how you're doing AI integration into your corporate function? And maybe that's a business opportunity for someone to build that.
Right. Yeah, I think this whole discussion that evolves into data is where people start snoring, right? The data is that dirty part of everything that is baseline AI, right?
Right.
You just don't want to scratch into the surface and talk about data. But here's the thing: as a business leader, you have to go to places where you're not comfortable going to and talking about. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business leader who has to, make decisions for other people's family, you have to know these information, and that's what we are so immersed into at this point. Because risk management framework is only the conversation starter, but you have to put the time into it. You have to put the effort into getting your team involved in it. You have to upskill your team so that way they can write requirements that makes business sense rather than to say, I'm just going to use ChatGPT API and make this work somehow. Well, what happens if ChatGPT goes down for, let's say, a few hours, not a few days? Or what if ChatGPT were to ever disappear? How did you prepare your APIs to do future AI work?
Right. Or
I'm going to
more
say,
interestingly,
that's
if I were to use generative AI to generate code and
right,
maybe even deploy it,
right,
well, what's the impact on my security posture? Because that AI is writing API, it's calling APIs, etc. Do I know all the APIs it's calling? Do I know what it's doing with it? Again, it could be malicious, it could be benign, it could be unknown, but you are exposing your APIs and your data and your infrastructure to risk if you don't have a good sense of the supply chain and the provenance of every aspect of what you're bringing to bear. So these open source AI models that people are using, and again, for good effect and good reason. I think there's a level of scrutiny and structure, and dare I say, regulation that needs to be put around it because you won't know what's happening until it's too late, if ever. It goes to a larger point about, what are some of the buzzword or not buzzwords? What are some of the key themes that need to be wrapped around rolling out AI into as an entrepreneur, as an established business, as a large business, understanding the transparency, traceability, and provenance of the entire AI model. Is it ethical? Is it trustworthy? I mean, do you have transparency into what it's doing and where it came from? Not just the black box issue, but the roots and etymology of all the aspects of the model. The integrity of the process, the security of the training data, how fragile are the algorithms? We haven't even talked about, people who are, this is a statement of fact, who are attempting to maliciously um, undermine algorithms, right? Um,
Sabotaging, poisoning data.
Poisoning data, poisoning the algorithms. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of malfeasance going on, or the word that I was reminded that I love, perfidy, around around people trying to take advantage of the integration of these untested and unregulated, or at least unstandardized technologies in a wild, wild west kind of way. Um, so you see these companies that are, feel like they're in a arms race with their competitors. I got to do this better, or they're feeling significant cost pressures or competitive pressures, or they feel they're in a significant technology debt and they want to jumpstart getting, catching up on that, reaching for some of these off-the-shelf AI solutions that are just slightly modified for what they're looking for, accelerate their efficiencies and for their current processes and identify new options, but they're bringing in a host of liabilities and risks that are unquantifiable.
Look, I think as we're moving forward with this, a solution is nearby, but we just don't know how near it is, right? How far do we have to go? How much time do we have to wait for it? It's coming by. And Gartner's top 10 emerging technology for next this decade is there's three AI products in there. There's one is XAI, explainable AI, and the other one is TRISC, which is trust, risk, and security. So if you are able to build these type of AI for any entrepreneur that's listening or anybody who's interested in engaging on this AI topic, those are the topics that you have to look into and say, how do I create a product around that? Because the internet is a Jenga piece. It's been helped and supported by so many people, but if we're not all playing the Jenga, somebody's going to collapse the whole thing for us, right? And AI is no different. And a lot of people are comfortable with AI these days, and I kind of want to go down in my inventory of scare tactics and talk about the fact that
In doubt, it's the best way to sell anything.
and the best way to explain that is that there's a lot of digital migrants and digital refugees and digital natives, right? Digital natives being somebody who was born after 2000s who literally never had to go through the training of how to use a damn mouse or a keyboard, right?
Right.
They're digital natives. And the digital refugee being somebody who's been impacted negatively by AI or technology, and then the digital migrants like myself, who was born back in the 80s and had to learn about how to do internet, and so on and so forth. So you got these three tribes that every digital natives now are looking at AI being super comfortable with. And I think we need to revisit that terminology of digital refugee, digital natives. We have to talk about AI natives and AI refugees and AI migrants, right?
Right.
So this AI immigrants that I am, just like I was with tech, I'm approaching this with very little comfort, right? I am not comfortable with AI at all, and here I am selling AI. That's because I am vendor neutral. I'm providing this bias-free feedback to say you cannot get comfortable with AI. It's not software. Just because it's not working, you can fix the bug and update the patch, and all of a sudden put it back out in the ether again, right? AI doesn't work that way. AI is like literally having a brat child that you have to raise and constantly monitor and constantly give it some feedback to make it work better. It's
Right.
not software. It's you literally have to understand that you cannot get comfortable with AI. It's a
And pay
very
attention to the friends
horizontal
that you hang out
place.
with, and where it's getting its bad influences, and where all of those things. Right. Right. It's a great analogy.
It's
I
like a
mean,
child. You have to have a whole village to raise this child, and you have to be really careful.
yeah, that's a great analogy. But it circles back to your point about, I mean, so you've got the refugee, the immigrant, and the native. I don't think I think that people who are going to be natives are being born now, right?
That's right.
Um, and frankly, from all the documentaries I've seen in the Terminator documentary series, they've got a rough life ahead of them. Um, so we'll see how that goes. But for the rest of us who are either migrants or refugees, I think refugees is a polite way of saying people who are going to be out of a job, right? These are the, I mean, that earlier we talked about who are the losers to AI. These are people whose job or function that they have found as the source of their livelihood will become obsolete because it can be done cheaper, faster, at scale. Um, and so there's a social issue about what do you do about that, and how do you get people trained into where they can be an AI immigrant, right? And find a place where it's that human machine partnership, and it makes them, it enables someone who maybe doesn't have the base skills to be immediately employable. Maybe if we do some level of AI integration and create the tools that wrap around the work that they're doing, then they become more effective. I think a great example of that would be help desk people who come in at a very low, entry level skill sets, or customer service people. There's more than one story out there about customer service centers or call centers using AI as a remember old Clippy from Microsoft? They've got where these AI models are helping the customer service people be more effective in responding to what the customer's challenge is, or in the call centers. And so you have what was previously a low skill job, where every customer service center I've ever called, they have a script, and heaven help you if you try and get them off the script, right? I told you the answer to that question 4 minutes ago, but you didn't listen. They have to go through the script. Well, if you give them these AI tools, as I think some of these companies that are thought leaders are doing, then they're able to be far more responsive and flexible and capable, and work their way up the problem chain to where it might have been considered tier two or maybe even tier three support. You're able to do with the tier one trained person, right? And with the AI in their hip pocket, helping them get there. So that's a great example of someone whose job could have gone obsolete, but they actually are empowered to do better. Um, but when you roll these tools out, like we started the conversation, it's a social event. It's a social problem. How does your workforce understand how workflow processes and value production is going to change? And are you collaborative with them on how this tool matters? You can't just do a drive-by fielding and expect them to get the most out of it, and expect you to receive the benefits that drove you to make that decision to begin with. That's just a foolish way. That's a very short-sighted way of going about it.
Yeah, so we are getting into that part of the discussion where we're talking about generation and generational changes. So
Right.
AI natives, AI migrants, and AI refugees, and to to have that warning sign displayed does not mean people don't call it a suggestion. Like you see a speed sign, oh, that's just a suggestion, not necessarily something they have to abide by, right? So
Right.
so I think it really goes into the side of things that, like, we have to talk about the history of AI, where it's been and where it's going, right? History of AI is as old as 60 some years at this point, right? We can even refer back to like 1907, where artificial intelligence was first discussed, and we've been augmenting ourselves for a very very long time, even before that. So when you put your shoes on, you go far, and the shoes is what's augmenting you. So AI as an augmenting solution is no different than having put on your shoes. But if your shoes become annoying, just like your customer service can becoming annoying, because you can have an AI as a customer service, it does poorly compared to your customer rep that used to actually do an annoying job. Well, it's still an annoyance. It's just in a different degree of annoyance, and nobody wants to go through that experience, right?
Right. Right.
So I think historically speaking, we've been augmenting ourselves for a very long time. And to how to augment ourselves with internet, how to augment ourselves with laptop, how to augment ourselves with AI, is a concern that um, uh, it's a concern that is to say, how do I scale it? As in, how do I make the problem here in a scalable fashion. And I think it's worth mentioning. You mentioned Terminator, and we can talk about Skynet, and that's the kind of visual people get about the dystopia of what an AI looks like. Well, the other side of it is the utopia, of course. That AI there is to augment people and help people, assist people to do things better. And like I
Right,
mentioned, the workforce will need AI regardless of what we think about it, because there's
right,
just not that many people in the workforce, specifically in some of the developed country like U.S., Germany, and so on and so forth, right? But we are seeing some shift in capabilities where population is growing in a certain part of the world, and AI is going to play a huge role there. So AI into the future, what we're looking at is augmenting device. It almost becomes a race because who's being augmented by AI, how are they being augmented, and what scale are they being augmented is going to make the huge differentiator between a nation's success in coming days.
right.
Um, so I think, all right,
I think if you look at, to your point, what's an example of you loosely the term AI that's been a successful integration. Spell check. When I'm typing, right, and a little red line comes underneath my horrific spelling, and then take it to the next level, Grammarly, which says, David, you're actually a really crappy writer. How about if you said it this way? And you're reading it like, oh, that's helpful. I mean, if you take it to the logical extension, then you have people using Chat GPT to coming up with original content. But we're seeing that that's been messy on on the first generation out, between stuff being hallucinations and just inaccurate, and that a lot of that is sourced back to where is it getting its training data from, what's the data sets allowed, and then there's some problems within it. But the idea of, hey, I'm trying to write an email, I'm trying to write a letter, and the computer, the AI, is telling me maybe if you write it this way is a little bit better. That's like the first step of what you're talking about. I could easily see if I'm a trader on Wall Street and I'm like, oh, buy pork bellies. But if the AI pops up and says, what if you wait and you buy plastics now and pork bellies tomorrow because historically, it has access to data to say that's a better sequence of the trade. To be clear, I don't know anything about pork belly or plastics. I'm just quoting two movies. Um, but that's making that trader better based on the AI having access to infinite data, infinite ability to compute the data and making recommendations. Now, does that trader trust what the AI is saying? Is it, consistently right? Can you ask it, hey, why are you telling me to do this? And it gives you a compelling reason very quickly while they're on the trading floor. That's that integration you're talking about to make them do their job better generationally.
right. Yeah, I think I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think, David, one thing I can guarantee that I will persuade you to come back to this podcast.
I'd be happy to. You want to put up with me? I'm happy to do it.
and you're a busy man and you have very limited amount of time. So for you to spend the time with me on a Sunday afternoon, I super appreciate it. And any community that we want to reach out to with this message will definitely benefit from your perspective. Um, because you've seen it all. You've done it all. Like you're part of a big community in Maryland, as I can understand. So you know, how can we reach out to you if anybody wants to get in touch with you and say, let's have a discussion with David?
Yeah. Um, so probably email is the easiest. David.Tohn, Tohn, at unleashbts, one word, .com. That goes right to my email queue. Also, if you go to unleashbts.com, our website, you'll see a link to contact us, and that'll get to me as well. I confess I'm not super active on the social media pieces. I find that I don't have the time to give it the attention it deserves to communicate well. But I am on LinkedIn and I am on Facebook. The benefit of having a very unique last name is that everyone knows and can find your last name. The downside of having a very unique last name is that everybody remembers it, and when you screw up, boy, will they remind you of that. But it's easy to find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only David Tohn up
Awesome, sir. So thank you so much for joining this conversation. Ay, 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 ay.
there. Yeah. All good. All good.
I'm looking forward to your return and what we will discuss. I think we've carved a path for today because conversation needs to unfold and this conversation needs to happen. And, amount of information that we can give to people, there's always more to add with an update. So looking forward to that conversation soon. Take care, David.
Very much. Thank you very much. And you have a great weekend.